Welcome in to the Paul Kuharsky podcast. I'm Paul Kuharsky of paulkuharsky.com. Say my name 3 times, magic happens. Very pleased from Edley's, one of 8 great locations in Middle Tennessee, which I will review for you as we go. Also sponsored by Zen Sports. Very pleased to be joined by James Foster, known on Twitter as @NoFlagsFilmed. Been writing great stuff weekly at paulkuharsky.com on Wednesdays. James, how you doing?
Doing great, man. It's a race to the finish line for the draft, and a longer list of players that I want to watch than amount of time that I have to watch them. So
hard to imagine. How many players you think you've watched? You have a rough count?
Yeah, I have 307 players graded.
That's ridiculous. Where's the best place? Well, I will tweet related to this your master list, which is something to behold. A very, very smooth thing. You've sold me on numerous players with what you've written at PK.com. I think this is just going to be a free-for-all with people asking you about guys. I hate for it to just be like a name and a question mark. So if you ask a more detailed question, it's a lot more likely that I will take your question and ask James about it. Let's start where everybody's going to want to start with Cam Ward. You wrote a great piece at the beginning about differentiating Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. That seems to have been solved. Cam Ward is clearly, seemingly to not just analysts, but to NFL teams, the guy above Shedeur Sanders. For the Titans, do you find him worth pick number 1, or do you see a scenario where they would be Mavericks and pass on him because of his warts? And what could he do to transform the Titans organization the way you project him?
Yeah, I think in most classes, he's not like quite the caliber of prospect that would be the first overall pick. This year, I really see 3 blue chip prospects, which would be Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and Ashton Genty. I would personally still go with Carter if the injury concerns were, if I didn't have injury concerns with him, but I think Cam Ward would be my second choice. And, that's from the standpoint of me as the GM with unlimited job security, and I can afford to like take the long road and just do what I think is best for the long term. If I'm Brian Callahan, I would 100% be pushing for Cam Ward because that's really the only realistic scenario that he has to save his job. And I mean, I think that Ward, like definitely, like you said, has some warts as a prospect, but there's a realistic scenario where he ends up as a top 10, top 12, franchise quarterback. And so I don't think it would be a bad pick by any means.
What's so ceiling, you have him there. Floor, you have him where?
Yeah, I think floor would be maybe like a step ahead of Zach Wilson. And that like we're talking floor. So worst case scenario, I think it's unlikely that he ends up that bad. But, I think floor is that you aren't able to reel in the reckless tendencies, and he ends up being, a 10 to 12 interception a year type of quarterback. And what is actually more concerning than the turnovers is I didn't think he was very accurate, especially deep down the field. And so I think the floor is that you've got somebody that's kind of a big game hunter, but he isn't precise enough with the ball placement that he can hit a high enough rate of those throws down the field to offset some turnovers that he's going to have. But like, I do think that he, like, obviously his playmaking ability is really special. He's got not an elite arm, but a great arm by NFL standards. And I think he's an underrated processor as far as working from the pocket within structure. Like he can see things pretty quickly and throw with better anticipation than Will Levis did, like coming out of college and even at the NFL level. So it would surprise me if it turned out that he plays like his floor, but I think that kind of the way that we expected Caleb Williams to play, or at least the way that I expected Caleb Williams to play, that's kind of how I see Cam Ward is like a a volatile but good quality starting quarterback.
So the two things you touch on there that scare me and that have made me wary are the reckless tendencies and the accuracy. And I think first off, those are things we've seen from Levis, surely to a higher degree, I would imagine, than we would see from Ward, but also things that tend to be harder to correct for a guy if they are built in through a full college career into his, if you will say, quarterbacking DNA. I know people are probably automatically screaming Josh Allen, but Josh Allen's a huge exception to the correcting accuracy tendency of the league. So, what do you think about a guy's ability generally, and from what you've seen from Ward, his prospects for correcting those two elements of his game, the reckless tendency that maybe he could play great but then really shoot himself and his team in the foot with a reckless decision, and the idea that while that anticipatory arm stuff can really help you in the accuracy factor, that it can be undone at times by inaccuracy.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Ward, he only threw 7 interceptions in 2024, which isn't terrible, but I think a really useful metric is PFF's turnover worthy play rate, which basically counts throws even if the defender dropped it, like throws that should have been intercepted. Cam Ward's turnover worthy play rate for his college career is 3.4%, which is the exact same as Will Levis's in college. So he is kind of reckless with the football. I would like categorize his interceptable passes into 2 groups. There's throws where he's just like trying to do too much, whether it's extending the play or forcing it into a window that maybe he shouldn't. And those are the kind of plays that I can live with to an extent, as long as they're not happening, 2 or 3 times a game. If he throws like one kind of head scratching interception every 2 weeks or so, sure, but he's offsetting it with a bunch of big time throws and explosive plays, like I think that's that's a trade-off that you would take. What is really concerning with Cam Ward is he'll just make some egregious decisions, like throwing across his shoulder. I know it is pro day. Someone from the Titans was kind of chirping him in that video that was posted on Twitter, but like throws across his body that get intercepted, and like that's the kind of stuff that you just you pray that you can coach that out of him. And
he said he wanted to prove that throw. He wanted to make that throw. He said to show it off instead of not putting it in the repertoire, which is
I think his
odd.
focus should be putting less of that on tape. If I had to give him advice, but I mean I think it's definitely easier to reel that in than it is to fix somebody's accuracy. And like Cam Ward, we're not talking Anthony Richardson levels of inaccuracy. It's just I think below average for a first round quarterback. So I think that you want at least like limit the interceptions to him kind of trying to do too much more within structure than making some of those egregious decisions.
So let's shift to Abdul Carter for a second. He's not quote unquote clean. I've heard people say. Now, he had this tow truck driver incident that ended him up in anger management. He had a marijuana deal. Marijuana deal, not a big deal in this day and age. But when you stack it with some other stuff, you might question a guy's decision making. I've heard there's other stuff, that hasn't come out. That's hazy, obviously, but teams know information that we don't know. And then he's got the stress reaction in the foot. We know stress reactions lead to stress fractures. Stress fractures in big men are big deals in a foot. How much weight do you give this stuff that's not part of your film study that could factor into his draft value?
Yeah, if so I'm very selective with how off-field stuff affect somebody's grades. Like it has to be kind of a Jermaine Burton situation from last year where it's so like
Egregious.
clearly the football character is just kind of untenable. I think that if I was a decision maker for the Titans, like obviously they have a lot more insight into it because they've got a medical staff. They get to interview him. But when you stack up the off-field concerns and the medical issue that just popped up, like I can easily see myself kind of getting turned off from taking him with the first overall pick and just be like, yeah, Cam Ward's the guy that we need to go with.
All right, you did a 7-round Titans mock at paulkuharsky.com and made what I thought was a very good trade down from 35. You know, a lot of us have been dreaming of this trade down from 1. If they don't make the trade down from 1 and they take Cam Ward, still, it'd be great if they could get a 3rd-round pick. You can get a 3rd-round pick from trading from 35 to 45. Who are guys or a guy that if they're there at 35 would stop you and make you say, all right, we got to wait till 103 in the 4th. And we're just, this guy's too good for us to pass up given our needs at, I'm guessing it would be an edge rusher or a wide receiver that would make you throw on the brakes at 35, where this guy's too good for us to pass up and we're just going to have to eat it in the 3rd. Think about a healthy L'Jarius Sneed when that pick comes around and wait till our 2 picks in the 4th.
So there's a few players that immediately come to mind. I would say the 2 edge rushers, Michael Williams out of Georgia and Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. I don't see them falling out of the 1st round, but there's kind of a logjam at that position. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there's one guy that we're all expecting to get taken in the 1st that ends up slipping. So I think if they're available, I would definitely lean towar's taking one of them.
Man, if Williams was there, I mean, I've considered scenarios where they trade back to 8 and take Williams at 8 or 10.
Yeah, and I like there's mixed opinions on both Stewart and Williams. And then Mike Green out of Marshall is a much better player than those 2, but he's got a pretty serious off the field thing. And so they would, depending on how that checked out with the interviews, like if he was there, I would definitely consider that. And the other guy that I would mention is Luther Burden. He's my wide receiver 1 based on the tape grade, but again, it would come down to the interviews. There's a lot of stuff that's come out about him not being a good practice player and stuff like that. So it would depend on just how comfortable I felt with him as a person. But I think that he's one of the 10 most talented players in this class. And somebody that can be a yak monster as like a slot gadget player, but also a downfield vertical threat, a true separator. Like people don't give him enough credit for what he can do is like actual receiver stuff. It's not just a Deebo Samuel type of thing. So if the off field checked out with him, I would definitely consider him at 35.
James Foster, my guest on the Paul Kuharsky podcast, brought to you by Zen Sports and Edley's Barbecue. That's where I am in Berry Farms. James writes Wednesdays at paulkuharsky.com. Among what you covered this week was the idea of what can you afford to wait on more if you're the Titans. Obviously, super needy at both wide receiver and at edge. And you talked not so much about I guess it's both, but it's not as much about what you can get in the 2nd as what you can't get in the 4th if they're in their current situation.
Right.
2 picks in the 4th, but what can you get in the 4th at either of those positions where you can conceivably really get anything out of that guy as a rookie on the field in September?
Yeah. So, I mean, I mentioned in the article kind of just the disparity in production and like hit rate between edge and receiver in later rounds. There's, I think, seven receivers in the last 3 classes that have been taken on day 3 and had a 500+ yard season. And there isn't a single edge rusher that has had, day 3 pick that's had at least 30 pressures. Edge is kind of a position where it's so dependent on athletic traits. And so the guys that have the traits to really win at the next level, they just get taken early. Whereas receiver, there's a lot of players that maybe aren't the best athletes, but can win with technical nuance and stuff. And they get taken in the 4th or 5th round and still end up as really productive, sometimes even number 1 receivers. So kind of the point that I was making in the article is if you can't trade back and you have to pick at 35, I would much prefer that you prioritize taking edge early because, even though they're both very pressing needs, receiver something that you can potentially find in the 4th round. Now the Titans historically have done a great job of picking the wrong receivers when they get into those situations. So
they trade up for Des Fitzpatrick. That was a great one.
Yeah. Maybe don't trade up for receivers that other NFL teams don't even have graded. I would recommend that. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty weak receiver class at the top, but I think the depth is comparable to other years. I think there's a lot of receivers that are going to fall to that early 4th range and be there at 105 that could potentially be, a good number 2 to Calvin Ridley.
Get a question in quickly for James. We've only got about 10 more minutes with him. Ed Henry asking about Ward. Did his offensive scheme allow for multiple progressions, or was it 1st and 2nd read only stuff?
Yeah, there's a good amount of examples on tape of him sitting in the pocket, going 1 to 2 to 3. And as with most college quarterbacks, he still needs to speed up his processing because in the NFL, the windows are going to be a lot tighter. So you don't have that luxury of being able to kind of stare when you get to the 3rd read, be able to kind of stare and hesitate. But there are several really high quality reps of him just firing it in there with anticipation, and he can process and make full field reads at a pretty good level for a 1st round quarterback prospect. I think that compared to last year's class, showed as much of that on tape as Caleb Williams did. I would say. I think there's some other quarterbacks like Drake May, Jaden Daniels, I felt like did it at a bit higher level, but that's honestly not something that I worry about with him, and I think I would consider it a strength of his game.
TK's wondering your thoughts on Tony Horton out of Colorado State on day 3. He loves his ball catching and route running ability as a sleeper.
Yeah, so Torrey Horton is one of, I think, the more underrated receivers in this class. He's just such a well-rounded, solid, checks every box type of prospect. Really good blend of speed, fluidity. He can threaten the defense upfield, but then sink his hips, stop on a dime. Really good ball skills. He's a hands catcher, extends for the ball in the air. Productive after the catch. He's somebody that might not have the elite traits and skill sets to be a true number 1, but I think can just be an extremely solid number 2 and have a productive career. So I like Torrey Horton. If he's available at 105, I would be running that card in for sure.
Josh is a Texas guy. Any chance Golden or Bond are there for the Titans in the 2nd? I would certainly not think Golden.
Yeah, it would definitely surprise me if Golden was available. I've got him 12th on my board. I think he's, somewhere in that Stephon Diggs to Sterling Shepard caliber of receiver, very similar to them stylistically. Isaiah Bond is a really difficult player to kind of wrap my head around because he came into the year as my number 1 receiver. He was a top 5 player for me, and I think he's one of the 3 or 4 most talented receivers in this class as a true burner, deep threat, but he can also be a really dynamic route runner. I think that he's very similar, just his upside to Zay Flowers, Jalen Waddle, of somebody that can obviously be that explosive threat down the field, but where they're really going to burn you is on comebacks and deep outs and being a true intermediate separator. The thing with Isaiah Bond, though, is that he just, you really didn't get to see much of him over the second half of the year. He had, I think, 146 total yards after week 5. He was dealing with the injury. There's some really concerning reps on his tape of like just awful effort in the run game, which might seem insignificant, but I remember watching that tape like during the season and immediately lowering my grade from that. I just knew NFL teams are going to see that and like not value like kind of the effort that he was giving. So yeah, I don't know. I've still got him 58 on my board. I could see him falling to like the 4th round. I definitely think he'll be available in the 2nd round though. I think that would be a reach.
You know these numbers off the top of your head? You know you have him 58, or are you looking somewhere to reference?
Yeah, no, I've got my board pulled up right now.
Yeah, all right. That's going to be pretty impressive. Ed wants to know, is tight end an understated need? I don't think it's an understated need, but he wants to know, could some of those be considered equal to these wide receivers? I'm curious about that myself. Like, I consider Callahan such a 3-wide guy, but percentage-wise, Cincinnati, it's not like they ignore their tight ends even as a 3-wide team.
Yeah, and that's something that that I kind of talked about in my most recent article is that they might end up in a situation wherever it is that they're, wanting to target a receiver and not actually like many of the receivers that are on the board, but have higher grades on the tight ends and just say, let's get the best pass catcher that's available. So if they're sitting there in the 2nd or 3rd round and they've got somebody like Mason Taylor, I really like Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, and you could get that connection with Cam Ward. He's somebody where like the medicals would have to check out because this is really the first year that he's been able to have a fully healthy season, but he's got true seam stretching speed, really solid hands, a little bit on the lighter side, but I mean, he's 6'5", 250. So he's not like a Chigakonkwo type of player. Gives incredible effort in the run game. They're going to love his run blocking tape. I think he could be a true top 6-7 tight end. And, depending on where he falls, that might be better than taking a swing on like a project receiver or somebody that's just going to be a number 3 guy, based on where they're available.
Needs to be a capable inline guy, though, I feel like.
Right. Yeah.
They got to have somebody can get up there and bang, and those are harder and harder to find.
Because, I mean, when they're an 11 personnel team, and like you can't have Chigakonkwo in line in 11 personnel because that pretty much removes your ability. Like even if you're in the shotgun and you're kind of in a passing situation, like you can't really call inside zone and have Chigakonkwo on the backside of the play one-on-one with a 280-pound defensive end because he's going to get blown off the ball. Like he does some nice stuff blocking out in space on DBs and stuff, but not an inline blocker. And who's the guy from Cincinnati? I'm drawing a blank on his name. The Titans tight end.
The Titans tight end from Cincinnati. Josh Wiley.
Yeah, Josh Wiley. Yeah. They were kind of expecting him to maybe be their inline guy, but he just didn't really take a step forward in the passing game this year. And so that definitely could be a position that they look to upgrade.
Yeah, Mark thinks they only need a Vanette replacement. Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech in the late round. They don't only need a Vanette replacement. They need to be better. What are your thoughts on Jimmy Horn Jr. as a late pick or undrafted free agent? Dwayne.
I like Jimmy Horn as kind of a gadget guy. He's, really undersized. I think that my biggest hang up with him is just catch radius. Like it's really got to be an accurate pass for him to make a play on it. Doesn't do a lot as far as, like he can't really high point the ball and like play above the rim in contested catch situations, but he's really fast, good change of direction skills as a route runner. If you get him the ball out in space, he can really be a big play threat. So as long as you're not spending like crazy draft capital on him, if you can get him anywhere late 5th to the back end of the draft, I think that would be a good pick. And also, the other Colorado receiver, I have almost identical grades on Jimmy Horn Jr. and LeJounte Wester, who are very similar players. It's kind of, you wouldn't expect a college offense to be able to support 2 pure gadget guys, but that just speaks to how many screens Shedeur Sanders threw last year.
I know you've got somewhere to be, so be short, and we'll get you out on this one. Robert asks, is James Pierce Jr. about the best boom or bust in this draft?
James Pierce Jr. is a weird player because he doesn't struggle in a lot of the ways that you would expect him to, but then he's not as good in some other areas. Like he's really explosive in a straight line, but doesn't necessarily have the bend and flexibility to win as often as a speed rusher and like turn the corner. And he's got this slender, upright build, but actually a really effective power rusher. And then, similar with the build, you would expect him to have a hard time holding up in the run game, but I thought he took a huge step forward there this year. I think that he's a top 15 to 20 player purely based on the tape. He's another one though that there have been some off the field stuff that have come out from like the insiders and stuff. I don't have firsthand knowledge of any of that, so it doesn't really affect my grade that much because I'm really just trying to purely do it based on the tape. But yeah, I mean, I think that he could be in that Brian Burns caliber of player if he's good in terms of football character.
Follow James Foster at No Flags Film on Twitter. Read him at paulkuharsky.com. Really appreciate you, buddy. Look forward to what's next. You're doing great stuff, and everybody's enjoying it. Get on to that next one. Tell them I didn't keep you. It's 12:59.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. All right. James Foster, good enough to join us. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm setting myself here half an hour more for us to do our regular thing. I am here at Edley's Barbecue in Franklin, off 65 and Paytonsville Road. My regular stop on Thursdays. Can you smell it? You got to come taste it. This place is phenomenal. You can also go to Franklin and the Factory, 5 Points in East Nashville, where my buddy Leon will pour you a tremendous margarita. Donaldson, Gallatin, 12 South, Nolensville. Get the fried ribs if you can, but everything on the menu is absolutely phenomenal. I can't recommend it highly enough. I know lots of you are regulars. Make an extra stop. Those of you who haven't checked it out yet, you're in range of one of these places. I know a high percentage of you are. Check out Edley's. They are good to me. They will be great to you. The customer service is phenomenal. The turnaround is fast. You can make a quick stop. You can be casual. You are going to be well fed. If you come for lunch, you're not going to need a big dinner. If you come for dinner, you are going to sleep well. Edley's Barbecue, the best around. Thanks again to James Foster. Appreciate so many of you coming in. Let's retweet, let people know that we are here. If you are watching on YouTube, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, do what you can in rating and reviewing. Appreciate all your support. Good to see so many of you. I appreciate it. Draft is drawing near. Can finally kind of see it, which is exciting. I wrote today, I was really, really surprised at the massive reaction to the news yesterday that the Titans signed Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle is an awful, like super awful quarterback. But, I mean, right now he's third on the Titans. Titans don't do anything with the third quarterback. And if they draft Cam Ward, he's fourth. And if they trade Will Levis, he's third, and he doesn't make the roster. I mean, he's the equivalent of an undrafted rookie free agent in terms of where he stands on this roster. He's going to take really meaningless snaps with other really meaningless people. Thanks, T. Johnson, for the compliment. And, I talked to somebody over there and said he's fourth, right? I said, yeah, absolutely. So you don't have to be concerned with Tim Boyle getting anywhere near meaningful football. Somebody saying he's Aaron Rodgers' friend. No. I mean, might have been on the Packers with Aaron Rodgers. Somebody else told me he was Will Levis's friend. Like that matter. Who cares who he's friends with? I mean, maybe Robert or Nicholas. But, I mean, slow news day, I suppose, but it just people are way too big a reaction. Here's also what it means. Titans usually have 3 quarterbacks on their 90-man roster and going into camp. Guess who usually has 4? Not usually. I mean, last 6 preseasons, I didn't look at 2020 because there were no preseason games. But going back to 2019, the Chiefs have had 4 quarterbacks on their preseason roster every year. They've played them. And Mahomes has played. Mahomes has played all but one preseason game in all of those years. He's played about 22 attempts per game. It's like a regular starting quarterback load. So they don't bubble wrap Mahomes. And they still have 3 other quarterbacks in camp. And they're guys who you've never heard of. Now, I wish we'd never heard of Tim Boyle because I've actually seen him in games, and it's been like, these guys probably would have done just as badly as Tim Boyle. But, I mean, you've heard of Shermer, but the other ones are, complete scrubs. What do I think of report that the Titans are seeking 3 firsts to trade out? I mean, I don't think they're getting 3 firsts to trade out unless somebody's coming from way out. I mean, New Orleans, I think, is at 9. I don't think you get 3 firsts to come from 9. But maybe. I mean, you're not getting 3 firsts from the Giants. No way. But it's nice. I think they're playing it right to get out there that the price is very, very, very costly. And that there's still talk out there about the potential for trade out, I think tells you it's not a done deal that Cam Ward is the guy. And I've maintained that all along. I think a lot of fans, want to get into celebrating the pick before the pick is absolutely done. Ed Henry with a good question. Does the success of Mahomes and his freelancing style distort our view of Ward's ceiling? Every GM's looking for the next Mahomes or Jackson. Does it cloud the judgment? Well, thing is, those guys are super rare. Could Cam Ward be a guy like that? Yeah, it's a super long shot. Could he be? He could be. What's the likelihood? It's pretty damn slim. So, maybe it distorts our view of his ceiling. You draft him and you see, or you don't. You let somebody else see, and you collect a whole bunch of other stuff. If they're playing the odds are no. So are you a guy that plays the odds, or are you a guy that says, I got to take my chance because if he is, I got to have him? I can see both sides of that. I wouldn't want to be the decision maker on that. I said on Monday, the thing that makes me feel more like I'm moving towards Ward. Well, one thing is I feel like the Titans are moving towards Ward, but the other thing is, to ask the Titans to pass on Ward, to wait for better next year is, you don't know about the certainty of being in a position to go get somebody next year. You're gonna compile the draft stock this year, but then you're gonna need probably to use that draft stock that you've compiled, some of it, to go get the guy next year. And so having compiled that draft stock doesn't help you build the roster. It helps you go get the quarterback. You're in position for him now. I think they're going to be better quarterbacks next year, but we don't know about these guys. They all have a season where to prove Nussmeier and Klubnik and Alar. They're not gems right now. We don't know. And what other team would I expect to have the nerve and the faith and the gumption to pass on the guy that's right in front of them in favor of the patience and the discipline, despite the Titans talking about patience and discipline? Not expecting the Giants to do it or the Browns to do it. Well, I'm expecting the Titans to do it. MB says the only place that would possibly get 3 firsts is from Pittsburgh. But I don't see that for Ward of all the quarterbacks. Pittsburgh's not giving up 3 firsts for anything. Pittsburgh is a consummate draft and develop team. Even if they thought he's the greatest quarterback in the history of mankind, they probably wouldn't give up 3 firsts for him. It's not their style. Audrey says there's been a lot of talk about how a quarterback fits Callahan's system, but in Chicago, Ben Johnson said he wasn't going to throw out the Lions playbook and build from the ground up for their players. Thoughts? I don't think that the Titans have to have a quarterback that fits Callahan's system. I think Callahan's got to, and he said this, make things fit. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to I didn't think they should have been in on Justin Fields, because I think you have to run something very specific to fit Justin Fields. That's, an adjustment for every guy on your roster. It makes you play a very specific, narrow, incomplete kind of offense that I don't think is the way to build a football team. But I don't think a quarterback fitting Callahan's offense is a primary thing here. If Callahan was some big established coach like Kyle Shanahan, then it's a factor. But he's not, and we know Callahan, is probably on thin ice. Are these seat fillers? I don't know, John, who you're asking about. Free agent depth signing. What are my opinion of free agent depth signings so far? Well, who are the depth signings? Let's take a look at. We'll get into that. Titans free agency tracker, and I'm a year behind here. These more recent guys. Bear with me for a second. Somebody like Mike Brown is a depth signing. Blake Hance, it's fine. He's fresh blood. Brandon Allen, I don't love, and I certainly hate. The newest quarterback, Tim Boyle, is as I've expressed, awful. I'm forgetting the name of the newest defensive outside linebacker, who I think is not Draymond Jones. I like Draymond Jones, but the extra one from Atlanta is nice guy to have on the roster, but he's not solving any problems in a big way. Zeitler is not a free agent depth signing. Zeitler is a big-time starter. In my opinion, what would be a realistic draft compensation from a team drafting between 3 and 6 for the Titans' first pick? First next year, that first this year, between 3 and 6. Third this year, second or third next year. You start there. It's probably more. What else is on your mind? Let me tell you about Zen Sports. Sweet 16 starts tonight. Opening day in baseball. New York Yankees probably just took the field, and here I am talking to you. How great is that? How great is America? New York Yankees against the Milwaukee Brewers. Don't tell me that they're down. I'm not going to give you a Zen Sports bet on the Yankees Brewers because it's underway. But I would have taken the under at 7.5 because I don't think the Yankees will score. I do not think the Yankees will score. Maybe tomorrow. The Brewers might score. Hopefully they don't score 7. I like BYU at Zen Sports, plus 4.5 against Bama. SEC down. Houston minus 8.5 against Purdue at Zen Sports. Go to Zen Sports, sign up using the code TNPaul. If you'd like to place a bet that's bigger than the bets that they'll allow you to place at the places that you bet most of the time, Zen Sports is the place for you. Go sign up, use the code TNPaul, and see, sky's the limit. They'll probably let you bet what you want. And betting what you want is pretty good if you've got a really strong feeling on the game. You ever moved the line before? Might be able to move a line at Zen Sports. It's a great place. I was sitting with a guy I know here at Edley's a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how well they treat him at Zen Sports. Got him front row seats to see a basketball game in Memphis where his team was coming to town. Got the royal treatment there, gets to bet what he wants. Personal service and concierge type of stuff when he wants to see a ball game. They take great care of him. High limits, Zen Sports. Use the code TN Paul. They will treat you right. Gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 and over in Tennessee to bet. Be careful out there. Be smart. What else we got here? People, in my opinion, I'll cover that one. If they're projected to draft a hypothetical quarterback next year, then they might as well project to trade out for a haul next year. They're just unlikely to be in this position again. Well, you trade out for a haul this year, you're going to draft one next year. You're not going to trade out for a haul both times and come out with no quarterbacks in 2 drafts. I don't understand that, Jason. And I don't think they're going to be in line for the number 1 pick 2 years in a row, but it's happened twice in the last 8. In the last 8 first-round picks, in the last 8 first picks overall, 4 of them have been part of back-to-back number 1 picks. Once by the Browns and once by the Jaguars. So it's not as rare as we think. If the Titans don't draft a quarterback this year, it's not inconceivable they could have the first pick again. Or it's not inconceivable to have the 3rd pick, and that the 3rd pick would be, behind one team that's got a quarterback and one team that doesn't. I mean, if the Giants were to land Cam Ward in this draft, or the Browns, do we think that they're going to be terrific next year? I don't. I think they'd be in contention for a top pick again. So, I don't know. I don't think the Titans would be in position for the number 1 pick again. I think they'd probably have to go up and get a quarterback. But also, I think it's conceivable that there would be 4 quarterbacks, drafted in the top 10 next year. And we know that's not happening this year. Ed Henry, how much of a team's media availability is dictated by the NFL, and is it fair that most teams will only do the bare minimum? Well, in season, it's there's policy. Policy is guys talk after games. A couple guys have to be available on Mondays. Locker room has to be open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and locker room has to be open after games. Out of season, some guys have to be available a certain amount of OTAs and during training camp. It's just a fact of life, the way it works. Some teams go above and beyond at certain times with new players, or when there's big news regarding a veteran player or the like, which is nice. This team's not doing that right now. That's the way it is. Audrey, how you doing? Nice to hear from you again here. Do I watch any John Boy media? We're talking Yanks since I'm a Yankees fan. His breakdowns are great. His breakdowns are phenomenal. The guy's incredibly talented. I'm very interested in what he has to say about the Yankees. Unfortunately, his choice was to bring his best friend, who's not very talented, with him. And so talking Yanks is somewhat insufferable because of his pal, whose name I can't even remember. I did talk to John Boy when he was starting out for an episode of Elsewhere, my alternate podcast that people still call for once in a while, that I did on how much he, John Boy, and a woman named Lindsay Alder, who was writing for The Athletic at the time, were doing to my Yankees fandom, because the unique coverage of the two of them was really helping draw me into the Yankees in a different way. So I'm really appreciative of him. But Jake, don't bring your friend in. Bring talent in. You're talented. Your friend is not talented. Richard's not a fan of waiting on a quarterback. Bird in hand is better than 2 in the bush. Yeah, but if the bird that you have isn't good, then it's not great. What do I think about what the Giants did, signing Jameis and then Russell Wilson? Seems crazy. I don't think the Jameis signing is that big a deal. It's $4 million guaranteed. He's completely expendable. I don't think it prohibits them from doing anything in the draft. I think people are making too big a deal out of it. Jameis Winston, not that big of a signing there. Is there one interview that I'd like to do? I mean, past or present athlete. My favorite athlete of all time is Greg Nettles, who played third base for the Yankees when I was a kid. It was my biggest fandom. I'd love a chance to talk to Greg Nettles, who it'd be more personal and less professional, though I'd like to make it both. Justin T loves that I brought James on, so knowledgeable and a bright young star in what he does. I'm thrilled to have James on board at paulkuharsky.com. Brings a whole different angle to pre-draft stuff than I could on my own. And I'm really happy to have him. I hope you guys are on board. If you're not a member of paulkuharsky.com, you're not reading what he's writing, which is some of the best stuff at the site during the week. And I recently put out a little ad slide about everything that I've been bringing to the site and out there, and a lot of news. So I really hope those of you who are not members of the site are realizing that. I've told you that the Titans, I mean, they're making a big deal out of it now. National guys, the Titans are setting up off-site meetings, going to visit these guys for private workouts. They're calling them workouts. Guys don't really work out at these workouts, but they're get-togethers. I told you that on February 28th. I told you a pay cut was a non-starter for Harold Landry. I told you what the Titans got in exchange for Kenneth Murray. I told you that they took Cam Ward out to dinner the night before his pro day. I told you they weren't going to be involved with Cooper Kupp. I told you that they weren't going to be involved with Sam Darnold. I told you Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers were non-starters. I told you Terrence Ferguson, the Oregon tight end, was coming to Nashville for a 30 visit. I told you they were hiring Mike McCoy as a senior offensive assistant. I told you that Dan Moore was going to play left tackle and that they were moving J.C. Latham to right tackle. That's all within the last 3 weeks, month. I'm sorry, nobody else has told you that much, anything close to that much. So you got to be a member of paulkuharsky.com. That stuff is news. I obviously share news with everybody, but then if you want to know what that news means, I'm your guy. Come over to paulkuharsky.com. Invest in independent media on your team. It's the right thing to do. Winston's contract is completely tradable if another team has an injury. Yeah. A lot of talk about trading that contract. If people wanted, I mean, sure, if there's an injury, somebody might look for him, but a lot of talk about it being tradable now. Like the whole world had access to Jameis Winston and nobody signed it. Blake Bedingfield will have a piece on Cam Ward sometime very soon. Thank you for asking. Another feature of paulkuharsky.com. Robert, in your opinion, the Titans are in a situation with Ward. If they pick him and he makes it, great. If they don't pick him and he makes it, then the fan base will crucify them. It's kind of a no-win. Yeah, Titans, by being bad, have put themselves in a lot of no-win situations. Poor guys. Make terrible decision after terrible decision and wind up in a place where people are counting on you to make the right decision. Imagine that. Ed's asked, logical to think that if Ward, it would be a longer leash for Callahan, but this team doesn't have a track record for doing the logical. Yeah. I mean, if Cam Ward comes in and he's growing on some kind of regular basis and reasonable clock, I think that'd be good for Callahan. But, I don't know how you could say if it's Cam Ward, he's got a longer leash, but if they're rolling it back with Will Levis and Brandon Allen is the backup, he's got a shorter leash. How can they have a shorter leash if they give him back crap at quarterback? That's on him. Light blue uniforms I love. That's called Columbia blue. I'm a Columbia guy. I got light blue in my blood. What advice would I give to an aspiring beat writer covering a team? Have a plan B. There's no such thing as a beat writer covering a team really anymore. For who? For what outlet? Sadly, it's a job that doesn't really exist anymore. There's no backing for it. How are you going to make money? Who's paying you? Very difficult. Don't aggregate for a living. That would be my advice. It's harsh, but difficult. So did they say outright? I saw that it was a Wyatt story and it was Burke talking about the uniforms, but did they basically say that their dark uniforms are officially light blue now? So I thought they said that they're wearing them a lot. Ed Henry, bad decisions, bad results, get criticized, then fire the PR guy. Time to look in the mirror. Agree. Absolutely. Look, it starts with ownership, and it's now absentee ownership. Absentee ownership that chimes in once in a while or gives a stamp of approval on firing people that have nothing to do with really what's going wrong. Robert says, I can't really read the Giants, really. They must not be sold on Ward enough to give up what the Titans really want for the pick. Well, they're not giving up 3 1s from number 3. But we don't know if they're sold on Ward enough to give up enough to get to number 1. We're still almost a month away from the draft. Nothing's not done until it's not done. And I mean, if you think Jameis Winston is a guy that's preventing the Titans, preventing the Giants from making a move to go get a quarterback, I think you're really overestimating the value of Jameis Winston. It's like some of these people that are reacting like Boyle. Some of these people that are reacting like Boyle has some bearing on the Titans' plans at quarterback. I mean, obviously Winston's better than Boyle, but Winston's not a guy when you sign him for $4 million guaranteed that's dictating your quarterback plan. It's just not. What else is on our mind? Yeah, look, here's another thing about Josh says, yeah, Wyatt had quotes from Nihil. They will also not be using the Oilers throwbacks next year per the article. Next year, not using the Oilers throwbacks, but wearing a lot of light blue, sells light blue jerseys. More jerseys than they're going to sell if they don't make a change. Hey, we suck. What can we do to juice up jersey sales? Oh, well, let's go more with the light blue. Well, some diehard people will feel compelled to go to games wearing light blue. John Shaft telling me things that I've been saying since the signing. Appreciate the info. I'm going to the owners' meetings. Ed, I'm more reliable to show up at the owners' meetings than Amy Adams Strunk is. Are we positive she's going to be there? I'm not. I know that the one guy who's a network guy, Robert's asking about Titans radio guys. JP Shadrack from Jacksonville. I know a little bit. Good guy. Hasn't done play-by-play as far as I know. And is it Taylor or Tyler Zarzer from CBS, I believe, has the endorsement of Jim Nantz. I think they'd like him. It's a matter of can they facilitate him doing his other stuff on Saturdays, maybe some college football, and being with the Titans on Sundays. And I don't love the idea that the Titans wouldn't be his primary or only thing. I mean, I know they can't model it completely after Mike Keith, and it's not going to be, it's going to be different than Mike Keith no matter what. But I think, to have an independent contractor doing your play-by-play seems weak to me. Seems weak to me. A couple more questions. We got a couple more minutes. I appreciate all of you showing up. And I don't know. Sam's asking, who do I see being a surprise player at 35? The name that seems to keep coming up as potentially slipping through there is Luther Burden. But we heard from James Foster earlier in this very podcast that there seemed to be some questions maybe about his practice work ethic, which is not something you want to hear. And you'd like your pick at 35 to be wart-free and not come in with the practice work ethic conversation. And the Titans have had practice work ethic question marks at receiver before. I don't know if that's fair to Justin Hunter or Dorial Green Beckham. They just weren't football players. They were athletes. But do I think owners' meetings kick trade talks up a gear, asks Richard. All the GMs are going to be there, so it can't hurt. But, nothing's stopping people from texting right now, and you know how easy it is to text somebody. So if you're in the office kicking around ideas with your staff, or you're having a beer when you get home late from work and something pops in your head, there's nothing that would slow you down from initiating a conversation, not in person either. So certainly possible. Certainly possible. Hunter was the first time Josh F. ever heard the term jag, just a guy, Justin Hunter. Terrible, terrible pick. What do I think of Stephon Diggs to New England? What could go wrong with an injured receiver who's been a bit of a locker room problem in his last two stops in Buffalo and in Houston? What could go wrong with Mike Vrabel in that situation? Look, they're desperate, and they're going for it. They got to get Drake May, somebody. Stephon Diggs, a very good receiver when he's healthy and playing his best. He's not the same guy that was playing in Minnesota at his peak, but he's good. Yes, it's essentially a one-year deal, but still an expensive one-year deal. So we'll see. Jim McCann. Long-term good employees continue to be canned by the Titans. Why? Desire for control by people with power and bad management by bad ownership. Those would be my answers to that. I don't know why G's stopping by. G's got all the answers. G should have a podcast. All right, folks, we're at the 58-minute mark. I'll take two more, and we'll call it a day. Go catch the Yanks, see what's going on with the rest of that. I'm looking for a fantasy baseball draft. I drafted a team last night. ESPN has this weird thing. Sleeper doesn't do fantasy baseball. ESPN has this weird thing where, so I pick a head-to-head. So I don't have any friends that do fantasy baseball. So last year I went into a random league. It was fine. It helps me follow things, stay up to date, look at something every day. I enjoyed it. I either won it or I finished second in the playoffs. So I go in last night, I do a couple mocks, and then I jump into a 10-team league, head-to-head, categories. And but not until after the draft is done do I see what the categories are. And they're like 3 hitting categories and 5 or 6 pitching categories. But there's nothing during the draft or before the draft that tells me what the categories are. So I didn't draft that way. I drafted for, it showed total bases. It looked like total bases were the big deal. I was drafting heavy on total bases. I had walks and strikeouts. I was drafting guys who walked and guys who didn't strike out. I was drafting pitchers who struck people out, but I don't draft pitchers as avidly as I draft hitters because you can move pitchers, during the season, I think. And then the league is like heavily weighted to pitchers. So I signed up for another one later today, but it's same thing. I can't tell what the categories are in advance. It's ridiculous. Burke Nihill was promoted, Dixie says, in 2020 after the Titans were coming off an AFC Championship appearance. Fired a head coach and 2 GMs since then. As Titans CEO, isn't he supposed to let Amy know if he disagrees? Well, look, I get along with Burke. I think Burke's done a lot of good things. The stadium deal's absolutely phenomenal work. But he had a big hand in hiring Rand Carthon, who's an absolute disaster. You can't tell me anything else. I'm sorry, you're wrong if you disagree. Hired Brian Callahan, who's not looking so hot. Definitely had a hand in firing Mike Vrabel. Isn't he supposed to tell Amy if he disagrees? Yes, but ultimately Amy's making these decisions. And I don't know if he's disagreed with all those things. He was on board with hiring Rand, and I think he was definitely on board with firing Vrabel. But these are difficult jobs in the degree of you dealing with, and I think some people out there can relate. If your company has a CEO, and so not a CEO like Burke Nihill, but a CEO like an owner, a figurehead, a person who really has to sign off on all of the decisions. A lot of you together could say, "Hey, we know this is a bad idea." And they're going ahead with it anyway. Or, hey, we know this is a great idea. Why aren't we doing this? And ultimately it comes down to, well, the big boss says so. And I think Burke Nihill and a lot of these people are in positions for that. He signed off on some of these firings probably, or Brinker may have brought some of these firings up. But ultimately they fall on Amy Adams-Strunk. She could say, no, don't fire that person. Or she could bring them that person to be fired, and they could say, don't fire this person. I don't know how well they could stand up to her, but people aren't getting it done. Overall, organizationally, they're doing dumb things. And until they stop doing dumb things, I'm going to call them out on doing dumb things. And I will say this about the media corps in Nashville. Privately, huge conversations going on about that firing. But where's the gumption that anybody stands up to the Titans and says something publicly about it? And I know most of the people in here are smart enough to understand that what happens there, while you might not care about it in terms of the football, know that it's, tells part of the story about the team's dysfunction, which it absolutely does. But these other people talk about it privately and then cower in the corner and don't say anything about it. For a guy who's worked for the organization for 28 years. I'm not going to sit down and not say anything about it. It's ridiculous. That's another reason why you should be a member of this site, quite frankly. You can stand up to these people and call bullshit when bullshit happens. The rest of the people text each other about it being bullshit and don't say a word. It's fucking ridiculous. It's a good place to sign off. I appreciate all of you. Gamble. You're going to place bets. Use TN Paul. Sign up at Zen Sports. Eat. You're going to eat. You got to eat, baby. There's a guy I know famously told his wife one time, you got to eat, baby. You should eat at Edley's. Delicious. Sign up paulkuharsky.com. Come read James Foster. Come read Blake Bedingfield. Come read Paul Kuharsky. paulkuharsky.com. $7.50 a month. Come on. You're not even going to notice it. Not even going to notice it. There's no reason not to be a member if you are as big a fan as you say you are. And if you are upset by what this team is doing, who's holding them to account? This guy. Join paulkuharsky.com. Final marching instructions. Don't block the box. Be sure to lock your locks. I love you. I appreciate you. I thank you for being here. I will talk to you soon. I'm at the owners' meetings starting Sunday. Supreme coverage from Palm Beach, Florida. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I will talk to you from there. Cheers. Be well.